Hello everyone, my name is Max. Welcome to Design Talk. In this video, we will talk about various types of buttons along with its states and interactions. Buttons are a common, everyday element of interaction design, because buttons are a vital element in creating a smooth conversational flow in web and apps. It's worth paying attention to these basic best practices for buttons. We'll also cover some important information you need to know to create effective buttons that improves the user experience. So, let's get started. Part 1. Action button. Just like how it sounds, it is a button where you expect users to take specific action toward it. In this part, we will see the hierarchy of buttons and how they are used. 1. Call to action, CTA, C2A. A call to action button, depending on the situation, will usually expect users to sign in, sign up, book now, etc. CTA buttons usually used when the app intends to strongly suggest something that the user should do. CTA buttons usually stand alone. You will likely find less or no other buttons near the CTA buttons. Take a look at these examples. 2. Primary button. Yes, indeed, CTA button and a primary button may look the same. But there's actually a difference when there are more buttons present in the option. Whereas CTA buttons are the interface that you would want users to do. Primary buttons are a strong visual indicator to help the user to complete their journey. Primary buttons are the first priority that you want the user to do compared to the other buttons presented. Primary buttons usually be used in situations where the user may want to perform next, yes, delete, etc. Here's what it may look. 3. Secondary button. Secondary buttons are the less priority action that you would expect to do than the primary button. It usually stated as go back to the primary button's next, or the cancel button to the submit button. Secondary buttons are the alternative we give users to the primary action. To differentiate its visual from the primary button. Usually secondary buttons have different shape, like if the primary button has solid color, the secondary button will be just line buttons or without fill. Have a closer look of the example. 4. Tertiary action. Tertiary buttons are usually used for the least actions you would expect from the user. The action is significant but may not be what the user is looking to do right away. Stuff like add friend, add new, edit, or delete, provided that they aren't a primary action or secondary action. Technically speaking, designers will use smaller or lay prominent button style for this. Here's some example of that. Part 2. Common button. In this part, we will cover common button styles and general use. We will talk more about several types of buttons and how it is applied in the everyday app. Firstly, solid buttons. These type of buttons are exactly what they sound like. They are buttons with a solid color. Secondly, line and ghost buttons. Line buttons are buttons without a fill, just an outline. These days, you will often see a light and dark mode while visiting a website or using certain app. We can say that line buttons as being on a light color which is with a dark outline and text. And ghost button as being on a dark color which with a light outline and text. How do you think? Thirdly, rounded buttons. While designing buttons in whatever platform you used, there's an option to configure the edge radius. Rounded buttons are buttons whose edges are set to the max rounded border radius. Rounded corners look modern. The momentum of applying full rounded corners started from mobile and then expanded to web UIs. Round corners communicate a sense of simplicity, optimism, and openness. It probably explains why many design systems adapted to rounded corners and use them broadly in icons, buttons, and illustrations. Fourthly, floating action button. When you scroll down or up while using an app or in a website, sometimes you see buttons that stays at the same position of the screen no matter how much you scroll. Those are floating action buttons. Floating action buttons are an astute design, made popular by Google's material design. Usually, they may look like icon button. They are actually used for the primary action on a screen. Fifthly, text link. Text links are a very simple button type. It is generally without border and followed with link. There are a lot of ways to show that the button is a link. You can add a color, or an underline, or the position of the link, or even just the text itself. Sixthly, icon button. Icon buttons are widely used with no label and only an icon. Because they don't have a label, they save a lot of space in an interface. Icon buttons also allow you to stack other icon buttons next to them in a small space. When designing icons, you should consider who your user are. I suggest you utilize generally used icons and be consistent in style. If you are designing products for elderly or people with low computer literacy, I recommend using buttons with a label alongside it. This is to reduce misconception of the buttons, especially for more abstract meanings. Eventually, icon with text button. You see bunch of icon buttons. But in reality, some buttons still need a label to ensure that the button communicates properly. The difficulties when dealing with icons and labels is figuring out how big to make the icon in relation to the font. You can try the first option by making the icon size similar to the cap height of the font. Or you can try option 2 by making the icon size a lot bigger than the line height. Let me give you a word of advice. If the icon is only a little bit bigger than the cap height, it will look disproportional or awkward. It should either be approximately the same cap height, or a lot bigger, and of course you should avoid in between. Part 3. Button coloring and styling. While designing buttons, there are a few of different aspects to take into consideration, such as color, border, shadow, etc. In this part we will dig much deeper into those. Firstly, color. This is one factor that is usually overlooked by some people. Some thought that deciding what color to use could be tiresome. One thing for certain, you need to ensure that your colors are accessible by everyone. To do that, you can use an online contrast checker. For me, I use webaim.org/resources/contrast checker/. At this site, you can insert which colors you use and check whether the contrast level passes the standard or not. Don't forget to think about the commonly used color when choosing your color palette. For example, delete buttons usually have red color, save buttons have green color, etc. Secondly, border radius. Rounded corners look visually appealing. Rounded corners are perfect for grids because they help with a friendly interaction. They are space-saving. They draw attention to the content and not the component. On the other hand, fully rounded buttons are perfect for CTAs. The reasons are, the component has to be standalone and you should have space to spare, as fully rounded buttons take up more space in the horizontal axis. This is better depicted in the graphic. Thirdly, shadow. The use of shadow on a button naturally brings attention to it. Buttons with shadows also looked more clickable and notice much faster than flat ones. Just drop a subtle shadow to the button to make it stand out from the background more. Shadows can also be used to indicate different states as well, whether on hover state, click state, on focus state, etc. Fourthly, horizontal and vertical padding. Button padding is one of the most important aspects of button styling. It also plays a major role in your interface accessibility. Button styling generally depends on the overall look and feel you are going for, as well as your own personal preferences. Buttons should be placed as far apart as one side of the horizontal padding, as depicted in the lower part of the graphic. The best approach, especially if you are designing for web, is by always taking the line height of the font you are using and add a unit to it. For example, a button label has a line height of 20 px and vertical padding of 8 px. There are two reasons for this. First reason, people with visual impairments may increase the font in their browser. Consequently, they need the font size to change without the button height cutting it off. Second reason, by doing this you make the developer's life easier. It's because how developers create buttons, they add padding to their div containers, not heights. There are two ways you can design horizontal padding. First option, make the button width align to the grid. This is a nice way of keeping all your buttons under a consistent length. The drawbacks of this option is the limitation the number of words you can use. Second option, have fixed padding on the sides. I also add a limit for a minimum width of a button, to avoid really small buttons. When this method allows for the case where you can have different amounts of text at the same time, it can make your buttons look very uneven. So, that was the end of the first part of button explanation. Don't forget to watch part 2 of the series. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the video. What do you guys think about button implementation? Share your thoughts on the comment below.